captured by an Apache woman tribe after getting lost. Their queen claims he was chosen. John had always loved adventure. Since he was a child, he would spend hours exploring the hills near his home, climbing trees and imagining himself as an explorer discovering hidden lands. As he grew older, his love for adventure only became stronger. He started planning bigger trips, reading books about remote landscapes, and dreaming about visiting places where few people ever went. The deserts of the American Southwest had always fascinated him. He had seen pictures of the vast canyons, the red rocks glowing in the sunlight, and the silent beauty of the desert at night. Something about the quiet open land called to him. It promised freedom, challenge, and a chance to truly test himself. One morning, John packed his backpack carefully. He had maps, a compass, water, food, and a small tent. He also had a notebook to record his thoughts and sketches of the landscape. He wore a sturdy pair of boots and a hat to protect himself from the sun. Feeling excited, he set out early to avoid the harsh midday heat. At first, the hike was easy. The trail was marked, and he followed it confidently. Birds chirped in the distance, and the soft wind carried the faint smell of desert flowers. John felt alive, the kind of alive he only experienced in nature. As the hours passed, the trail became less clear. Rocks and boulders blocked the path, and the signs he had been following seemed to disappear. At first, he wasn't worried. He thought he could navigate by following the sun and landmarks. But soon, he realized that the canyon twisted and turned in ways that confused him. Every rock he passed looked similar, and the narrow paths seemed endless. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and he felt the heat pressing down. His water supply began to feel insufficient, and he made a mental note to find a shaded area soon. By afternoon, John knew he was lost. The trail had vanished completely, and there was no sign of any other hikers. Panic began to creep in. The desert, which had seemed so inviting in the morning, now felt vast, empty, and threatening. He tried to retrace his steps, but every turn looked familiar and yet wrong. The heat made him dizzy, and he stumbled over loose rocks. Each step seemed harder than the last. He called out, hoping someone nearby could hear him, but his voice echoed back, swallowed by the canyon walls. There was no answer. John's mind raced. He thought about his family and friends, wondering if they would worry when he didn't return. He wondered if he should have stayed on marked trails. The reality of his situation settled heavily on him. He was alone, deep in the desert, and night was coming. He knew the temperature would drop sharply after sunset. In the desert, the day and night were extremes. Scorching heat by day, freezing cold by night. John's heart pounded as he realized he had to find shelter quickly. Hours passed, and the sun began its slow descent. Shadows stretched across the rocks, making the canyon seem even larger and more confusing. John's throat was dry, and his legs ached from constant climbing and slipping. Just when he thought he might collapse from exhaustion, he saw something unusual in the distance. Small, flickering lights, moving slowly. He froze, unsure what to do. Was it another hiker, a campfire, or something else? He debated staying hidden, thinking of the dangers of unknown people, but curiosity won. He approached cautiously, stepping quietly over rocks and brush. As he got closer, he realized it was a group of people, but not what he expected. They were all women, dressed in clothing that looked traditional and unlike anything he had seen. They carried torches, moving in rhythm, almost like a dance. John's first instinct was fear. He had no idea who they were or what they wanted. Yet despite his fear, he noticed something strange. They didn't seem angry or threatening. Their movements were calm and controlled, and their eyes were observant, not hostile. One woman, taller than the rest, stepped forward. She looked directly at John. Her expression was serious, but not unkind. Her eyes seemed to measure him, to understand him in a way words could not. John froze, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The language she used was unfamiliar, a series of soft, melodic sounds that he couldn't comprehend. Yet somehow, her tone seemed welcoming rather than dangerous. Slowly, she gestured for him to follow. John hesitated, weighing his options. He was tired, thirsty, and lost. But trusting strangers was difficult. He reminded himself that he had no other choice. Carefully he nodded and followed her, keeping his hands visible to show he meant no harm. The other women flanked him as they moved through narrow paths between rocks, their torches casting shadows that danced along the canyon walls. John felt like he had stepped into another world, a hidden place untouched by time. After a while they arrived at a hidden village, nestled in a small canyon. The village was breathtaking. Huts were built with care, blending into the landscape. Smoke rose from small fires, and the sound of soft laughter and conversation filled the air. Women of all ages were moving about, performing tasks with grace and purpose. John realized that this community had survived in isolation for a long time, preserving ways of life that most people had forgotten. John was offered water and food. The women didn't tie him up or treat him like a prisoner. Instead, they seemed to watch him carefully, making sure he was comfortable. The tall woman, who John guessed was their leader, observed him quietly, sometimes whispering to others. Although he was still nervous, John felt a growing sense of relief. He was not being attacked. He was being welcomed into a world he had never imagined existed. Sitting by a fire, John drank the water slowly, feeling it cool his parched throat. He listened to the sounds around him, the soft crackle of flames, the rustle of leaves, the murmurs of voices in a language he couldn't understand. The fear that had gripped him since getting lost slowly began to ebb. He still didn't know why he had been found by this group of women, but he felt that perhaps his misfortune had led him to something extraordinary. As the night deepened, John realized that he had to rest. The desert was dangerous, and exhaustion could lead to mistakes. One of the women led him to a small hut with a simple mat. She gestured for him to lie down and gave him a blanket woven from soft fibers. For the first time in hours, John felt safe enough to relax. Lying there, staring at the faint glow of the fire outside, he thought about the events of the day. Getting lost had been terrifying, but it had also brought him to a hidden world, a secret place where he felt both out of place and strangely at home. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know why he had been led here, or what the women wanted from him. But as he closed his eyes, exhaustion taking over, John felt a spark of hope. Maybe being lost had a purpose. Maybe this unexpected encounter was more than coincidence. In the quiet desert night, surrounded by the flickering glow of the hidden village, he allowed himself to dream about what might come next. John woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the small entrance of the hut. The desert air had cooled during the night, and he felt the crisp freshness on his skin. For a moment, he simply lay there, listening to the sounds around him. Outside, birds were beginning their morning songs, and he could hear the faint rustling of leaves as the women of the tribe moved about. Despite the strangeness of his situation, a sense of calm washed over him. He was alive, and he had survived a night in the desert. Carefully, he rose and stepped outside. The village was beginning to wake. Women were tending small gardens, carrying water in clay pots, and preparing simple meals over stone hearths. Some of them noticed him and smiled, though he could not understand their words. They moved with purpose and grace, and their quiet confidence intrigued him. Every step he took seemed to reveal more of this hidden world, and John found himself marveling at how the village blended seamlessly into the canyon. The huts were made from local stones and wood, and vines and shrubs grew around them, softening their edges. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet everything seemed extraordinary. One woman, whom John guessed was younger than the queen, approached him and gestured for him to follow. She did not speak a word he could understand, but her eyes conveyed patience and encouragement. She led him to a small stream nearby, where the water was clear and cool. John drank greedily, letting the fresh water wash away the dryness in his throat. The woman then gestured for him to wash his face. As he bent down, he noticed the skill in her movements, every gesture precise, respectful, and gentle. It struck him that the tribe's connection with nature was deep. They did not take more than they needed, and every action seemed thoughtful and purposeful. After washing, he returned to the village with her. The other women were busy with morning tasks, but they gave him space, observing him quietly from a distance. John realized that although he was technically a captive, the feeling of imprisonment was absent. Instead, he felt like a guest, someone being tested, perhaps, but not harmed. Curiosity mixed with a cautious trust as he took in the daily life of the tribe. They seemed self-sufficient in every way, tending crops, gathering herbs, cooking meals, and making clothing from natural materials. John could see that this was a community that had survived in isolation for generations, preserving knowledge that outsiders had long forgotten. Throughout the morning, John began to notice the rhythm of the village. There was a calm efficiency to everything the women did. They moved silently but with clear intent, their gestures almost ceremonial, their eyes aware of every detail. Children played under the watchful eyes of older women, learning to mimic the skills of their elders. John watched as a young girl skillfully wove fibers into a basket, her hands moving with speed and accuracy. He could see pride in her eyes and in the eyes of the women guiding her. For the first time, John began to understand that this was more than survival. This was a way of life built on respect, patience, and knowledge passed down over centuries. By mid-morning, John was summoned to a small hut at the center of the village. He recognized the tall woman he had seen the previous night, Queen Nayeli. Her presence was commanding yet gentle, and when she looked at him, he felt as though she could see into his very thoughts. She gestured for him to sit, and John complied, feeling a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. Around her, other women gathered, forming a quiet circle. They spoke softly among themselves in their language, occasionally glancing at John. He could tell they were discussing him, observing his reactions, his body language, and perhaps his character. Queen Nayeli began to communicate with gestures and expressions, showing objects, pointing to places, and moving her hands in ways that told a story. Although John could not understand her words, he could sense the meaning in her actions. She was explaining something important, and he realized that this interaction was a test of observation and patience. He watched her carefully, trying to respond appropriately, learning quickly that the tribe valued attentiveness, respect, and humility. Every mistake he made seemed to be noted but corrected gently, without anger or judgment. Over the next several days, John began to follow a routine. He helped with simple tasks around the village, such as gathering firewood, carrying water, and preparing food. The work was hard but satisfying, and he discovered a rhythm that he had never experienced before. The women were patient teachers, showing him how to handle tools, move quietly through the canyon, and respect the land around him. John noticed that he was learning not just skills, but a way of thinking. Everything had meaning. Every action, every sound, every movement was part of a larger understanding of life and survival. During this time, he also learned to communicate in small ways. Gestures, facial expressions, and pointing became his language. Slowly, he began to understand simple words and sounds in their language. He realized that the tribe's survival depended on careful attention and cooperation. Everyone had a role, and every action mattered. John marveled at their efficiency and the way the women supported each other. Even when performing tasks silently, there was a sense of unity, a shared purpose that connected them all. One afternoon, while helping to repair a small hut, John noticed Queen Nayeli watching him. Her expression was unreadable, yet he felt a subtle approval in her gaze. After the work was done, she called him over with a wave of her hand. John approached cautiously, unsure what to expect. Nayeli handed him a small carved figure made from wood. She gestured toward him and then toward the figure, as if explaining its significance. Though he didn't understand the exact meaning, he felt the weight of her message. It was a symbol of connection, of trust, and perhaps a hint that his presence in the tribe had deeper meaning. That evening, John sat near the fire, reflecting on the day. He thought about how far he had come, from fear and confusion to a sense of belonging and purpose. He realized that the tribe's way of life was not just about survival, but about respect for each other and the land. There was wisdom in their routines, patience in their actions, and a deep understanding of balance in their world. John felt both humbled and inspired. He knew that he was learning lessons that could never be found in books or in the cities he had left behind. As days passed, John continued to integrate into the village life. He helped with planting, learned to gather herbs, and even assisted in preparing simple medicines from natural ingredients. Each task taught him more about the tribe and themselves. The women shared their stories, their traditions, and their knowledge of the desert. John began to feel a sense of gratitude for their patience and guidance. Even though he could not communicate fully with words, he could sense their intentions and trust. He realized that he was no longer just an outsider. He was slowly becoming part of something bigger. At night, Queen Naeli would sometimes sit quietly by the fire, watching the stars, and John would join her. They did not speak much, but the silence was comfortable. He felt that she was teaching him something beyond skills, lessons about observation, patience, and respect. Her presence was calming yet powerful. John understood that she had a role in shaping his experience, guiding him without forcing him, and allowing him to discover his own path within their world. One morning, a few weeks into his stay, John noticed that the queen called him to the center of the village. This time, there was a different energy in her presence. She gestured toward the sky, the land, and then toward him. John felt a sense of anticipation and curiosity. He could not fully understand her message, but he realized that his journey with the tribe was moving to a new stage. The queen's eyes held a meaning that went beyond words, suggesting that his arrival in their hidden world was no accident. John went to sleep that night with a mix of excitement and wonder. He thought about the unexpected path his life had taken, from being lost in the desert to being welcomed into a secret community. He realized that every moment, every choice, and every action had brought him closer to understanding something profound about life, survival, and human connection. He did not yet know what the future held, but he felt ready to face it, guided by the tribe's wisdom and the queen's watchful eyes. John had settled into the rhythm of life in the hidden village, but he could feel a tension in the air he didn't fully understand. The women moved around him with calm purpose, yet he sensed that something important was about to happen. Queen Naeli had watched him closely for days, her gaze quiet but powerful. She never scolded him or treated him harshly, but John could tell that she was evaluating him, not just for his ability to survive or help, but for something deeper, something that went beyond skills. The sunlight filtered through the narrow doorway, casting long shadows across the floor. John stepped inside, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. Naeli sat quietly on a woven mat, her posture straight, her eyes steady. She gestured for him to sit before her. Around the hut, smaller figures, other women of the tribe sat quietly, observing without speaking. John understood this was a serious moment. He had seen enough of the tribe's customs to know that everything they did had meaning, and this gathering felt significant. Naeli began to communicate using gestures and symbols carved into small pieces of wood. She pointed to the sky, then to the desert, then to John, moving her hands in a way that made him feel the weight of her message. At first, he could not understand what she meant, but as he watched closely, he noticed a pattern. She was telling a story, one that connected the land, the tribe, and him. John realized that Naeli was conveying something profound. His presence in their hidden world was not random. The queen's gestures became more deliberate, more insistent. She led John outside to a high ledge overlooking the village and the canyon below. From this vantage point, the sun reflected off the rocks, painting the landscape in shades of gold and red. Naeli motioned for him to sit and watch. She pointed to the horizon, to the patterns in the desert, and finally to him, placing her hands over his chest. The message was clear. She believed that he had been brought to the tribe for a reason, that he was chosen in a way that was sacred to them. John felt a wave of disbelief and awe. Could it be true? Was he really chosen, or was this simply the queen's way of showing trust and respect? He struggled to put his thoughts into words. Naeli, noticing his hesitation, smiled softly. She placed a small hand-carved object into his hands, a figure of a bird with outstretched wings. She pointed to him, then to the bird, and then raised her hands towards the sky. John understood the symbolism. Like the bird, he had been brought to this place to see the world from a different perspective, to gain understanding and knowledge that others might never receive. For the next several days, John's life changed in subtle but powerful ways. Nayeli began involving him in rituals and lessons that were normally reserved for the tribe's most trusted members. He learned how they read signs in the sky, how they interpreted the patterns of animals and wind, and how they used these signs to guide their decisions. Every lesson carried meaning beyond survival. It was about understanding life, respecting the land, and recognizing the unseen connections between all things. John felt both humbled and inspired. One afternoon, Nayeli took John to a quiet area near a natural spring hidden deep in the canyon. The water was clear and still, reflecting the sky above like a mirror. She gestured for him to look at his reflection, then pointed to the surrounding cliffs, the trees, and finally to herself. She moved her hands slowly, in a language he could not speak, but he could feel the intent. She was teaching him to see beyond what was obvious, to understand that everything in life had meaning and purpose. John spent hours at the spring, practicing the lessons, observing the world around him in ways he never had before. The queen also began testing him in small ways. She observed how he treated the youngest members of the tribe, how he handled tasks that required patience, and how he reacted when things went wrong. One day she gave him a seemingly impossible task, to gather herbs from a steep cliffside without disturbing the delicate plants or endangering himself. At first John was nervous, but he remembered the lesson she had taught him. Carefully he climbed, paying attention to every step and every movement. When he returned with the herbs intact, Nayeli nodded in approval. She did not say a word, but John felt that he had passed a test that went beyond skill. He had demonstrated respect, patience, and understanding. John also began to notice subtle changes in himself. The fear and anxiety he had felt when he first arrived in the canyon had faded. He moved more confidently, spoke through gestures more clearly, and understood the rhythms of the village. But more importantly, he felt a growing sense of purpose. He realized that being chosen did not mean he was special in the way he had once imagined. It meant he had a responsibility to learn, to respect, and to carry the tribe's wisdom with him. Every action he took mattered, and he began to understand that the queen's claim was not about privilege, but about trust. The tribe's daily life continued, but it was now intertwined with deeper lessons. John helped with planting and gathering, assisted in preparing traditional remedies, and observed the ceremonial practices of the village. He watched as the women moved in unison during rituals, their voices rising and falling in song, their movements precise yet fluid. John was allowed to participate in small ways, and he felt a deep connection to the rhythm of their world. The queen's presence was always near, guiding him, teaching him without force, letting him discover his own understanding. One evening, Nayeli took John to the top of a hill overlooking the entire canyon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. She gestured toward the horizon, then toward the land, and finally toward him. The message was clear. He had a role to play, not just in the village, but in the larger story of life and connection. John felt a mixture of awe and humility. He realized that his journey was no longer just about surviving in the desert. It was about understanding his place in the world, and how his actions could ripple outward in ways he could not yet see. Over time, John began to embrace his new identity within the tribe. He understood that being chosen was not about privilege or power, but about responsibility, learning, and respect. He listened carefully to the queen's teachings, observed the smallest details of the village's daily life, and practiced patience in ways he had never imagined. Every day brought a new lesson, and John felt himself growing, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. He realized that this experience, born from getting lost in the desert, was transforming him in ways he could never have planned or predicted. Despite the wonder and excitement, John also faced moments of doubt and fear. He wondered if he would ever be able to return to his old life, if his family and friends were worried about him, and if he could carry the tribe's teachings with him when the time came. But each time doubt crept in, Nayeli's calm presence reminded him of the importance of trust, patience, and understanding. Her gaze seemed to say that he was capable, that he had been chosen because he could rise to the challenge. and that the lessons he was learning were meant to guide him for the rest of his life. By the end of the third week, John felt a profound shift within himself. He no longer saw the desert as a harsh, dangerous place. Instead, he saw it as alive, with lessons, stories, and wisdom hidden in every rock, tree, and animal track. He understood that being lost had been the first step in discovering a world he could never have imagined, and he knew, deep in his heart, that Queen Naeli's claim that he had been chosen was true in a way that went beyond words. It was not about destiny alone, but about growth, responsibility, and the courage to embrace the unknown. John had now been with the tribe for several weeks, and every day brought a new experience, a new lesson, and a deeper understanding of their way of life. The initial fear and uncertainty that had accompanied his arrival had faded, replaced by curiosity, respect, and a quiet determination to learn. Life in the hidden canyon was challenging but beautiful, and John began to feel a connection to the land and the people that he had never known before. Each morning began before sunrise. The crisp desert air carried the scent of earth and wildflowers, and the sound of water trickling through the small streams provided a soothing rhythm to start the day. John would rise with the queen and the other women, learning to move quietly through the village, careful not to disturb the sleeping children or the delicate balance of the village life. At first, every task felt foreign. The way they built fires, gathered herbs, and prepared food was unlike anything he had done before. But with patience and careful observation, he began to follow their routines, gaining confidence and skill. One of the first lessons John learned was how to track animals in the desert. The queen, Naeli, led him through narrow paths, pointing out subtle signs that most people would overlook: a bent blade of grass, a faint footprint in the sand, the broken branch of a bush. Each sign told a story, and John learned to read the landscape like a living book. He practiced moving quietly, noticing every sound and movement around him. Over time, he became adept at predicting the patterns of animals and the shifting winds, skills that were not just practical, but deeply connected to the tribe's understanding of the world. The tribe also taught John about their crops and herbal remedies. He learned how to plant seeds in precise patterns to ensure growth, how to identify herbs with healing properties, and how to prepare them correctly. These lessons were not merely instructions. They were stories of survival, wisdom passed down through generations. John marveled at the depth of their knowledge and the care with which it was taught. Every plant, every action, every decision had meaning, and John began to appreciate the interconnectedness of life in the desert. Cooking and preparing meals was another way John learned about the tribe's culture. Simple ingredients became meals of nourishment and tradition. He watched as women roasted seeds over fire, ground grains into flour, and combined herbs for flavor and health. Each task was performed with respect and patience, and John discovered that cooking was more than preparing food. It was a way of honoring the land and the community. Occasionally, the queen would taste his efforts and offer a small smile of approval, encouraging him to refine his skills without words, only gestures and expressions. John also began participating in ceremonial practices. At first, he observed quietly, unsure of how to contribute. He watched as the women sang, danced, and moved in unison, each movement carrying meaning and history. He saw how the youngest members of the tribe learned from the elders, mimicking their actions with care and reverence. Slowly, John was allowed to take part, following their gestures, listening to the rhythm, and learning the significance behind each movement. These ceremonies were not only spiritual but also a way of connecting the community, reinforcing respect, unity, and balance. Through all these experiences, John felt a transformation within himself. The fear and anxiety that had once dominated his thoughts had been replaced by focus, respect, and a sense of purpose. He realized that being chosen by the queen was not about privilege. It was about responsibility, learning, and the ability to grow. Every day in the tribe challenged him to become more observant, patient, and thoughtful. He began to see the desert not as a harsh, empty place, but as a living environment full of lessons, stories, and wisdom waiting to be discovered. One of the most important lessons John learned was about patience. The tribe approached everything with care, whether planting seeds, repairing huts, or gathering food. Nothing was rushed. John discovered that patience was not just about waiting. It was about paying attention, understanding, and acting with intention. He began to apply this lesson to himself, noticing how it changed the way he approached every task. Simple actions, when performed thoughtfully, became meaningful, and John felt a growing sense of calm and confidence in his abilities. John also developed close bonds with members of the tribe. The women taught him not only skills but also compassion, cooperation, and empathy. He saw how they cared for one another, how they supported the children, and how they shared their knowledge without hesitation. John began to feel like he was part of a community, not an outsider. The children, curious and lively, would often approach him to ask questions or show him small skills they had learned. John loved these interactions, feeling a sense of belonging that he had never experienced in the outside world. The Queen continued to guide him, though less directly now. She would watch from a distance, allowing him to try, fail, and learn on his own. Occasionally, she would call him to her and show him a new technique or correct a mistake, but always with patience and subtle encouragement. John began to understand that her teachings were not just about survival. They were about growth, understanding, and becoming a person capable of seeing and respecting the world in ways others might miss. One afternoon, the Queen took John to a secluded part of the canyon. The walls rose high around them, and a small waterfall cascaded into a clear pool. She gestured for him to sit and observe. John watched the water, the rocks, and the plants, noticing details he had never seen before. The way moss grew on shaded stones, the patterns of birds flying overhead, and the tracks of small animals near the water. Nayeli pointed to each detail, then to him, conveying that every observation mattered, that awareness was a form of understanding. John realized that being chosen meant learning to notice, to respect, and to act wisely in every situation. Over time, John became skilled in survival. He could navigate the desert, find water, track animals, gather herbs, and understand the subtle signs of nature. But more importantly, he had grown emotionally and mentally. He had learned humility, patience, and respect for life. The Queen's lessons had transformed him not just into someone capable of surviving, but into someone capable of understanding the deeper rhythms of life. John also shared stories of the outside world with the tribe, though carefully. He described cities, books, and people, always observing how the tribe responded. They listened with curiosity and fascination, and John realized that knowledge and wisdom could be shared in many ways, even across worlds so different from one another. Through this exchange, he began to see that learning was never one-sided. The tribe taught him survival and life lessons, but John, in return, shared glimpses of a broader world, connecting two very different experiences of life. As weeks turned into months, John's confidence grew. He no longer felt like a lost traveler or a temporary guest. He felt like a member of the tribe, entrusted with their teachings and their trust. Every morning brought new challenges and lessons, and John faced them with patience, respect, and curiosity. He had come to understand that the Queen's claim, that he was chosen, was not about destiny alone, but about readiness. He had arrived lost and uncertain, but through learning, observation, and humility, he had become someone capable of understanding and honoring the tribe's way of life. At night, he would sit by the fire with the Queen, watching the stars reflect in the quiet desert. Sometimes she would speak softly, and sometimes they would simply sit in silence. But John felt that in every moment, a lesson was being shared. He realized that being chosen was not about a grand purpose alone. It was about transformation, understanding, and the ability to carry what he had learned into the future. By the end of his months with the tribe, John had changed in ways he could not have imagined. He had learned the secrets of the desert, the wisdom of the women, and the lessons of patience, respect, and connection. He had discovered a part of himself that he never knew existed, a part capable of humility, observation, and deep appreciation for the world. John knew that no matter what happened next, the experience of living with the tribe had shaped him forever, preparing him for challenges and discoveries yet to come. The months John had spent with the tribe had changed him more than he could have imagined. He had arrived lost, frightened, and unsure of his place in the world, but now he moved through the canyon with confidence, understanding, and respect. He had learned the rhythms of life in the desert, the lessons of the tribe, and the subtle teachings of Queen Nayeli. Each day had shaped him, teaching him patience, observation, humility, and the value of connection. But as he sat one morning by the stream, gazing at the glimmering water, he felt a growing awareness. The time to choose his future was approaching. Queen Naeli had summoned him to her hut early that day. The morning air was cool, carrying the faint scent of desert flowers and the distant aroma of cooking fires. John approached slowly, his heart heavy with anticipation. Naeli sat cross-legged on her mat, her expression calm but serious. Around her, the women of the tribe gathered quietly, their presence dignified and attentive. John knew this was an important moment, not just for him, but for the relationship he had built with the tribe. The queen gestured for him to sit. She did not speak in words he could understand, but her gestures and expressions conveyed a clear message. She pointed to the canyon, the village, and the surrounding desert, and then to him. She made motions that suggested a decision needed to be made. He could stay with the tribe, learning and living as one of them, or he could return to the world beyond the canyon. John's mind raced. Staying meant embracing a life he had grown to love, filled with connection, learning, and purpose. Leaving meant returning to family, friends, and the familiar comforts of his previous life, but also leaving behind the people and wisdom that had become so important to him. John asked questions through gestures, trying to understand fully what each choice would mean. Naeli responded patiently, showing the responsibilities and expectations of staying with the tribe and the challenges and freedoms of returning to the outside world. John listened carefully, observing her gestures, her tone, and the subtle emphasis she placed on certain ideas. He could feel the weight of her trust in him. Being chosen had given him knowledge, skills, and understanding, but it also came with responsibility. His choice would honor not just himself, but the lessons the queen and the tribe had shared with him. For several days, John reflected quietly. He walked through the canyon, observing the land and the people around him. He helped the women gather food, repair huts, and teach the children, all the while weighing his options. At night he would sit by the fire and watch the stars, thinking of the life he had left behind and the one he had built here. He realized that he could not stay forever, but he also understood that leaving would not mean abandoning the tribe. It would mean carrying their wisdom with him into the wider world. The decision was difficult, filled with emotion, gratitude, and a touch of sadness. Finally, John approached Queen Naeli. Using gestures, he indicated that he had made his decision. Naeli listened, watching his expressions carefully, and then nodded slowly. Though she did not smile broadly, John felt her approval. Her eyes conveyed understanding, respect, and quiet pride. He realized that she had anticipated his choice, and that the lessons he had learned had prepared him for this very moment. Naeli then performed a small ritual, placing a hand-carved charm into John's hands and raising her hands to the sky. The message was clear. He would always carry a part of the tribe with him, and the tribe would always carry a part of him. The day of his departure was filled with quiet preparation. The women helped John pack his supplies, giving him food and water for the journey ahead. Children came to see him off, their bright eyes reflecting curiosity and affection. John smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection. He realized that though he would leave the physical village, the bonds he had formed and the lessons he had learned would remain with him forever. Naeli stood at the edge of the village, her presence calm yet commanding, watching him with quiet intensity. John bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, and she returned the gesture, acknowledging his growth and readiness. As he walked through the canyon, John turned frequently to take in the view. He saw the huts, the women moving about their tasks, and the children playing. The canyon that had once felt like a place of fear and uncertainty now felt like home. He reflected on how far he had come. From being lost and terrified to being chosen, taught, and transformed. Every rock, stream, and tree held a memory, a lesson, or a story. The desert was no longer just a backdrop for his adventure. It was a teacher, a companion, and a guardian of wisdom he would carry with him. During his journey back toward the outside world, John thought about the lessons he had learned. He remembered the patience required to track animals, the focus needed to gather herbs without damaging the land, and the importance of observing and respecting every living thing. He thought about humility, about how he had learned to listen, to follow, and to grow under the guidance of others. These were lessons that could not be rushed or forgotten. They were ingrained in him through experience, practice, and trust. As he left the canyon behind, John felt a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that the Queen's claim, that he had been chosen, was true in a way that went beyond words. He had not been chosen because of luck, skill, or accident. He had been chosen because he was capable of learning, growing, and carrying wisdom forward. This realization filled him with pride, but also with humility. He understood that his journey was far from over, but that he was now equipped with the knowledge and perspective to face whatever challenges awaited him. Reaching the edge of the desert, John paused one last time. He looked back toward the canyon, remembering the hidden village, the Queen, and the women who had welcomed him into their world. He realized that he had not only survived being lost, but had been found in ways he could never have imagined. The tribe had given him more than shelter and food. They had given him understanding, patience, and a deeper appreciation for life. He felt that a part of the hidden canyon and of the tribe would always remain with him, no matter where he went. When John finally returned to civilization, he was changed in ways people could not immediately see. Friends and family noticed a quiet confidence in him, a patience in his actions, and a reflective nature in his words. He shared stories of his journey carefully, never revealing the tribe's location, but conveying the lessons he had learned about respect, observation, and connection. People listened with curiosity and admiration, sensing the depth of his experience, even if they could not fully understand it. John carried the tribe's teachings with him in every aspect of his life. He approached challenges with patience, made decisions with careful thought, and observed the world around him with awareness and respect. He found that his experiences in the desert had given him clarity, resilience, and a sense of purpose he had never known before. He realized that being chosen by the Queen had not been about privilege or honor alone. It had been about transformation, growth, and the courage to embrace the unknown. Even years later, John would think back to the hidden canyon and the women who had changed his life. He would remember Queen Nayeli's calm guidance, the rituals of the tribe, and the quiet lessons taught through patience and observation. Though he returned to the world of cities, roads, and technology, the wisdom of the desert remained with him, shaping the way he lived, worked, and connected with others. He knew that the experience had not ended. It would continue to guide him, inspire him, and remind him of the deep lessons hidden in unexpected journeys. In the end, John understood that being lost had been the beginning of everything. His journey into the desert had led him to a hidden tribe, to a queen who saw his potential, and to lessons that would stay with him forever. He realized that life often presents paths that seem frightening or uncertain, but that within these paths lies the opportunity for growth, understanding, and transformation. The canyon had given him direction, the tribe had given him wisdom, and Queen Nayeli had given him the gift of being chosen, not for fame or recognition, but for the chance to become a better, wiser, and more thoughtful human being. John's journey back into the wider world was quiet, but purposeful. He walked with confidence, respect, and humility. Every step was guided by the lessons of the canyon and the tribe. He knew that wherever life took him, he would carry their teachings in his heart, silently honoring the hidden village, the Queen, and the women who had welcomed a lost traveler and transformed him forever.